They threw me a 50th birthday in the garage, plastic chairs, cold pizza, and a gift card with my name wrong. My sister even snorted, 50 years and nothing to show. I still smiled, took photos, and posed for the grandkids. Nobody noticed I was missing from the group pics. Nobody asked where I went. 2 weeks later, they found the letter I left on the mantle. My 50th birthday wasn't a celebration, it was an awakening. I found myself in a corner, watching my family laugh, completely oblivious to the quiet storm I was about to unleash. I'm David. At 50, you spent decades holding life together. The job, the kids, the mortgage, fixing the leaky sink no one else notices. When that big round number hits, you hope for a moment, a real pause where the people in your life stop and say, "Hey, thank you. You mattered." But what I got was a folding chair next to a half-eaten big box store sheet cake and a cooler of warm beer in my sister's garage. I've always been the quiet one in the family. The reliable one. The guy who says, "Sure, no problem, whether you need a last-minute soccer pickup or help moving a couch an hour away." I'm the one who brings extra batteries to Christmas, even though no one asks. I'm not flashy, I don't make scenes. I was the second oldest of 4. The one with decent grades who never asked for much. My younger brother, Steven, was the golden child, football star, charming, magnetic. People adored him, even when he forgot birthdays or crashed mom's car. My older sister, Michelle, was the loud voice of reason, acting like a third parent, always with an opinion. Always right, according to her. I used to think I liked being in the background, it felt safe. Then I realized invisible wasn't the same as safe. My birthday fell on a Saturday this year. It felt like a gift. I hadn't had a real celebration in over a decade. The last one, my 40th, involved burnt toast and orange juice from my kids. Sweet, but not a milestone bash. So when Michelle called 2 weeks prior, saying, "Hey, we're putting something together for your big 5-0. Just come over to my place," I actually smiled. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'll do it right this time. The morning of, I woke early, made coffee, checked the weather, cloudy, chance of rain. Sitting on my porch, I pictured the evening. Maybe string lights in Michelle's backyard. Maybe catered food. Maybe someone would say something kind. I let myself hope. Pulling into Michelle's driveway at 5 p.m., I saw the garage door open. Tables pushed aside, rows of mismatched plastic chairs. A single happy birthday banner drooped above an old folding table piled with pizza boxes and off-brand chips. No music, no decorations, no visible cake. Steven waved from the driveway, red Solo cup in hand. "David, you made it," he shouted, like I was a surprise guest. I forced a grin. Of course. Wouldn't miss it. Michelle emerged, wiping her hands on a paper towel. "Hey, birthday boy," she said, giving me a one-armed hug. "You don't mind grilling, do you? Got burgers and hot dogs. Figured you'd want to take the reins." I blinked. "Grill? Yeah, you're the grill master, right?" She nudged me toward the rusted Weber in the corner. "It's kind of your thing, wasn't it?" I hadn't grilled at a family event in years unless someone specifically asked me to. But I nodded. Sure. Because that's what I always did. My grandkids were there, at least. They ran up, gave me hugs, faces smudged with pizza and chocolate. "Grandpa, look," they held up dollar store plastic whistles and glow bracelets. I smiled for them, crouched for selfies, trying to ignore the flicker of disappointment. The rest of the evening blurred into lukewarm hot dogs and half-hearted conversations. Michelle eventually brought out a vanilla sheet cake with "Happy Birthday, David" written in blue icing. I stared at it. Michelle burst out laughing. "Oh my God," she snorted. "Look at that. They spelled your name wrong. Classic. Should have checked the box." I laughed too, out of habit. "Yeah, classic." Steven clapped my back, almost knocking my plate. 50 years and nothing to show for it, huh, he grinned. Just kidding, just kidding. You got those grandkids at least." I looked at him then. Really looked. Untucked shirt, beer in hand, the same smug, careless smirk he'd worn since high school. He didn't mean it, not really. But he also did not mean it. I started noticing things. None of the group photos had me in them because I was always behind the camera. Michelle kept asking me to take shots of everyone else. Nobody ever said, "Hey, David, come be in this one." At one point, I sat down in a corner chair and just watched. No one noticed. I wasn't bitter yet, just numb. Like the night was a mirror, showing me something I didn't want to see. I thought of the hours I'd spent driving people to airports, lending money, fixing things, always showing up. Here I was at a party I didn't plan, eating pizza I didn't like, joked about like the family's favorite old shoe. Around 9, I slipped into the house, said goodbye to my grandkids, and left a letter on the mantle. I'd written it that morning, honest, not cruel, but clear. Nobody saw me leave. 2 weeks went by. Not a word. Then they opened the letter. And everything changed. I didn't expect a parade after they read it. Not even an apology. But I thought maybe a call, a text, some acknowledgement that someone had noticed I wasn't there when the last slice of cake was passed out. That my car wasn't in the driveway for their final group photo. That they'd wondered, even briefly, why I left early. But the silence? That was worse than any insult. That was confirmation. The first person to reach out wasn't Michelle or Steven. It was my daughter, Chloe. She called one night, 2 weeks after the party, sounding hesitant. "Dad," she said. I saw the letter. My heart sank. "How'd it get to you?" She sighed. Aunt Michelle posted a picture of it in the group chat. Said it was peak dramatic energy and we should all get a laugh. My throat went dry. She posted the letter? Yeah, Chloe confirmed. And Steven replied with a popcorn gif. That broke something in me. It wasn't that they disagreed with what I wrote or thought I was wrong. What crushed me was they turned my pain, years of it, into a punchline, a meme. The letter wasn't long. It said, plainly, how invisible I felt. How I'd spent my life showing up for people who never showed up for me. How I didn't expect a parade, just a little effort. A real thank you. A sign I mattered. I ended it with one line. If this was the best you could do after 50 years, I'd rather spend the next 50 with people who see me. Apparently, that was comedy gold. Chloe didn't laugh. She didn't join in. In fact, she was the only one who asked, "Did anyone actually ask Dad how he's feeling?" Steven responded, "He's feeling sorry for himself." Clearly, 50-year-old midlife crisis. Classic. Michelle wrote, "I always knew David was a little sensitive, but this is a bit much." Sensitive. That's the word they always used. Like caring too much was a flaw. Like noticing you've been forgotten was an emotional allergy. After the call, I took a long walk around my neighborhood. Fall leaves were turning and the air had that sharp chill. Standing at the edge of the park, watching a dad push his kid on the swings, a strange detachment settled over me. Not sadness, not even anger, just a feeling like I'd been watching my own life from the sidelines. And suddenly, I was ready to walk off the field. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Something old and buried was waking up inside me. The next few weeks were quiet. I didn't call anyone. I stopped replying in the family group chat. No one noticed. I watched the messages roll in, Steven sharing a video of his new boat, Michelle complaining about everything, photos of brunches I wasn't invited to, updates on my niece's dance recital that no one told me about directly. One Saturday, I saw they'd all gone to the lake house. Our late parents' place, the one we inherited together, the one I'd maintained for 5 years because David's good with tools. They'd gone without telling me. Photos showed them smiling on the dock, holding beers, standing in front of the house I'd personally reshingled. There was even a picture of my old fishing rod in Steven's hands. He was pretending to cast while Michelle laughed. I stared for a long time. No one mentioned I wasn't there. No one asked, "Where's David?" That's when the idea started forming. But before that, before things really unraveled, came the breaking point. The betrayal I still remind myself wasn't a dream. It was November, a few days before Thanksgiving. Traditionally, we always had dinner at Michelle's. Everyone brought a dish. I always brought the green bean casserole, Chloe's favorite, and usually carved the turkey. I debated whether to go. Part of me wanted to stay home, curl up with takeout. But Chloe called again. "You should come, Dad," she said gently. For me? Not for them. So I did. I showed up 10 minutes early, casserole in hand, a polite smile fixed on my face. No drama. No scene. Just present for my daughter, for the grandkids, for the memory of what family used to mean. Michelle answered the door in a cranberry sweater, glass of wine in hand. "Oh," she said, blinking. "You actually came." I forced a laugh. "Well, it's tradition." She eyed the casserole. "Hope you didn't bring the same one as last year." That one was dry. I hadn't changed the recipe. I handed it over without comment. Inside, the house buzzed with noise. TV on, kids running, the scent of turkey and cinnamon. Stephen was already on his second beer, bragging to some in-laws about an investment. When he saw me, he raised his drink. "Hey, look who decided to forgive us," he grinned. "Must have run out of tissues." I ignored him, heading toward Chloe. She gave me a warm hug and whispered, "Just breathe." "I'm glad you're here." Dinner started tense. I kept my head down, helped with carving, made polite small talk. Michelle had arranged the seating, and I noticed, very deliberately, I was placed at the far end of the table between two of Stephen's loudest in-laws. Every time I tried to speak to Chloe or the grandkids, the conversation shifted away. Then came dessert, or more accurately, the moment. Michelle stood and tapped her glass. "Before we cut the pie," she said, smiling too wide, "I just want to say a few words." My stomach clenched. "I know this year's been interesting," she continued, glancing at me. "But at the end of the day, family is family. Even when certain members get a little theatrical." Polite chuckles rippled. "I mean, really," she added, "we've all had tough birthdays, right? You don't see me writing dramatic letters and storming off." Stephen piped up, "Yeah, David. I didn't get a golden chariot on my 50th either." More laughter. "And honestly," Michelle went on, "if you're going to take yourself that seriously, at least spell check the letter first." I stood. Didn't say a word. Just stood, chair scraping back. "Oh, come on," Stephen said, raising his glass. "Don't be like that, David. We're just teasing. Lighten up." But I didn't move toward the door. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. I placed it on the table right in front of Michelle. She looked down, confused. "What's this?" "You'll see," I said quietly. Then I turned to Chloe. "I'm sorry." And I left. Behind me, the room buzzed with confusion. Stephen called out. Michelle started opening the envelope. But I was already down the front steps, already in my car, already driving away from that house like it was a collapsing building. And I was walking out just before the roof caved in. The envelope didn't contain a letter. It contained something much more shocking. And when they finally realized what I'd done, the family would never look the same again. It's strange how quiet the world gets when you stop trying to be heard. The weeks after Thanksgiving passed like fog, thick, slow, muffled. I didn't go to Christmas. Didn't respond to texts. Michelle tried calling once, probably out of panic after opening that envelope, but I let it ring. I figured they'd either come to terms with what happened or twist it into another punchline. Either way, I was done explaining myself to people who weren't really listening. I wish I could say I felt triumphant. That driving away from that dinner table, head held high, envelope on the linen runner, was the moment I claimed my power. But that's not how it felt. The truth? I felt hollow, numb, lonely. Because the breaking point doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with silence. There were nights I'd sit on my porch, blanket around my shoulders, wondering if I'd overreacted. If maybe they were right. Maybe I was sensitive. Maybe I was making something big out of something small. That little voice, familiar and cruel, kept whispering, "You're the common denominator, David. Maybe you're the problem." But then I'd remember Michelle holding up my letter like a joke in the group chat. Stephen calling me David, like I was 15 and stuck under his shadow. The photos at the lake house without me. The plastic chair in the garage, the cake with my name spelled wrong. No, I wasn't overreacting. I was just finally reacting. Hitting rock bottom doesn't always look like screaming or crying. Sometimes it looks like staring at your phone for hours, not waiting for a message, but because no one's messaging you at all. Sometimes it's walking through a grocery store and realizing you haven't said a word out loud in 2 days. Sometimes it's watching the world move on without you and wondering if you ever really mattered to it in the first place. But in that quiet, something started to shift. It began with a visit from Chloe. She knocked one Saturday afternoon, holding a bag of takeout and 2 bottles of iced tea. "Figured you haven't eaten anything green this week," she said with a soft smile. I didn't try to pretend otherwise. I let her in. We ate in silence for a while, sitting on the couch with the TV playing softly. Then she said, "They're freaking out, you know." I glanced at her. "About the envelope?" She nodded. "Especially Michelle. She keeps texting me, asking if I think you're serious. Steven says you're bluffing." I smiled a little for the first time in days. Let them guess. Chloe studied me. Was that always the plan? Just drop that and walk away. I looked down at my hands. It wasn't a plan. Not at first. It was just finally putting something down after carrying it too long. "You don't have to tell me what it was," she said gently. "But you look lighter." Lighter. Not happier. Not better. But lighter. After Chloe left, I pulled out an old notebook from my desk drawer, one I hadn't touched in years. It had pages filled with sketches and home repair ideas from when I dreamt of starting a small handyman business. I'd always been good with my hands, liked solving problems, fixing what was broken. But life had gotten in the way. Kids, bills, family obligations. Time slipped by, and I told myself I was too old to start something new. But now I had time. And for once, I wasn't pouring it into people who didn't value it. So I made a call, then another. I fixed a neighbor's leaky faucet. Then I retiled a bathroom for an old coworker's cousin. Word spread faster than I expected. I wasn't flashy, just efficient, fair, and kind. People appreciated that. They left reviews. They referred me. They told their friends. Within 3 months, I had more work than I could handle. I registered an LLC, Second Fix Home Services. Cheesy maybe, but it felt right. Like a nod to this second chapter. I worked hard. I worked quietly. I made enough to pay the bills and then some. More than that, I felt useful. Not in the he'll-do-it way my family treated me, but in a real, honest way. People looked me in the eye and said thank you. And they meant it. I started saying thank you back. Not just to them, but to myself. Thank you for walking away. Thank you for letting go. Thank you for starting over. It wasn't just work, either. I reconnected with old college friends, people I'd lost touch with during the chaos of raising kids and being the family fixer. One of them, Sarah, invited me to a local community book club. I laughed at first, me reading fiction every week. But I went, and I liked it. We'd sit in the back of a small bookstore on Thursday nights, sipping coffee, arguing about plot twists. For the first time in years, I wasn't just David the handyman or David the dependable brother. I was David who had opinions about character development. David who liked stories. Sarah and I started meeting for lunch after the club, then for walks, then for dinner. She didn't ask about my family at first. When she eventually did, I told her the short version. She didn't pity me. She just listened. "I think you finally stopped pouring into the wrong cups," she said one night over pasta, "and started watering your own roots." I laughed. "That sounds like something from one of our books." "Maybe," she said, "but it's still true." And she was right. In April, I took a week off work to renovate my own house, a project I'd put off for years because I was always too busy helping someone else with theirs. I painted the walls a deep navy blue. I installed new shelves in the garage. I even built a small fire pit in the backyard. It was the first time my home felt like it truly belonged to me. Still nothing from Michelle or Steven. Chloe kept me updated. Michelle had tried calling again, leaving voicemails pretending nothing had happened. Steven had made some sarcastic Facebook post about people who can't take a joke, which Michelle liked and commented on with a laughing emoji. They still didn't get it, but it didn't sting anymore. I'd stopped bleeding for people who didn't notice they'd cut me. And then came the moment everything changed again. It was midday. I was patching drywall in a retired couple's sunroom when my phone buzzed. "Chloe," they lawyered up. "Michelle's panicking." I set down my tools and stared at the screen. So, they'd finally opened the second envelope, the real one, the one I'd left with my attorney to be delivered if I didn't retract the first. I'd warned them. I really had, in the letter they laughed at, in the envelope at Thanksgiving. But they never thought I'd follow through. They thought I was bluffing. But I never bluff. Not when it comes to betrayal. Because they hadn't just mocked my feelings or forgotten my birthday. They'd done something far worse. Something I had proof of. And now the consequences were finally coming. I never wanted revenge. Not in the beginning. That's the part people always get wrong. They think revenge starts with rage, with yelling, with slashed tires and dramatic showdowns. But the truth is, it's quiet. It starts with silence, with disappointment so deep it stops being loud, with a cold kind of clarity. The kind that shows up only after the last person you trusted stops pretending they care. It starts the day you stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start asking, "Why did I let them?" By the time I got Chloe's message, I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. Calm. Clear. Patient. Because the moment I decided to step out of that garage on my birthday, the moment I left that envelope on the Thanksgiving table, I wasn't walking away from them. I was walking towards something. And I wasn't going to stop halfway. Let me back up, though, to explain the second envelope, the one I'd warned them about. See, the lake house was never just a lake house. It was our parents' legacy. Paid off in the 90s, nestled against the tree line of a quiet little private lake, with a dock that creaked and a fireplace we all sat around every winter growing up. After Dad died and Mom followed a few years later, the four of us inherited it equally: Michelle, Stephen, our youngest brother Noah, who lived out of state, and me. At first, we agreed to keep it for family gatherings. But slowly, like everything else in our family, it stopped being ours and started being theirs. Michelle took over scheduling. Stephen brought friends up there without asking. They claimed they were managing the property, but what they were really doing was using it, often without telling anyone. I can count on one hand how many times I got to visit over the past 5 years. They said I was too busy, that I never asked. The truth? I'd stopped asking because every time I did, I was told the dates were taken, or the plumbing needed repair, which I was then asked to fix, or there was a family thing already planned that I clearly hadn't been invited to. And I stayed quiet. I kept doing the repairs. I paid for the new water heater. I winterized the pipes every year alone. Once, I drove up in a snowstorm to fix a burst pipe Michelle forgot to mention until it was leaking through the guest bedroom ceiling. They called me the caretaker, half joking. Said I should be proud they trusted me with the dirty work. They said things like, "It's just your strength, David. You show love through service." No one ever asked how I wanted to be loved. What they didn't know, what I never told them, was that 3 years ago, Noah and I had a long talk. One of the rare times he flew in. We sat by the fireplace in that same creaky old lake house, watching snowfall. And he said, "David, I hate how they treat you. Always have." I didn't answer at first, just stared into the flames. Then he added, "If you ever decide to sell your share, let me know. I might want to do the same." That planted a seed, not out of spite, not out of greed, but out of the realization that maybe, just maybe, I could take back control of something they'd stolen from me piece by piece. That year, I started documenting everything. Every repair I did, every cost I covered, every holiday I was excluded from. I kept receipts, took photos, recorded phone calls. When I fixed the dock, I saved the invoice for the lumber. When I installed new locks after Stephen claimed he lost his keys again, I saved the bill. I also started asking questions quietly. I learned that Michelle and Stephen had been renting out the lake house on weekends through a private rental site under Michelle's husband's name, earning thousands. Never telling me. Never telling Noah. Not a dime split 4 ways, not even a mention. And that was the betrayal. See, it's one thing to forget someone's birthday. It's another to mock their pain. But to steal from your own brother? That's not just rude, that's criminal. I contacted a real estate attorney. We reviewed the shared deed. Technically, all 4 of us were equal owners. But if I could prove financial exploitation, exclusion, and negligence, I could force a partition sale. In plain English, I could force the lake house onto the market unless they bought me out fairly or faced a judge. But I didn't file right away. I waited. Waited until they humiliated me on my birthday. Waited until they mocked my letter. Waited until they made it clear they'd never see me as anything but the family doormat. Then I sent the first envelope, a warning. And when they ignored it, I gave my lawyer the green light to send the second. Now Michelle was panicking. Stephen was lawyering up. And Noah? Noah was on a plane. He texted me as soon as he landed. They called, begged me to side with them. Told them I already signed the affidavit. Let's burn this down. I smiled at that. Noah had always been the quietest, but when he picked a side, he didn't waver. He was tired of being left out too. We met at my place that evening, sat in the backyard near the fire pit I built. He looked around and said, "Looks like you finally got your own piece." I nodded. Took long enough. He pulled out a folder. I printed everything. Timeline, expenses, evidence. This thing's airtight. We spent 2 hours reviewing the case. I had the paper trail. He had the affidavit. We had messages, emails, even a voicemail where Michelle joked to a friend about squeezing the boys out of the lake house before they caught on. By the time we were done, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Because this wasn't revenge anymore. This was justice. The next few weeks moved fast. The petition filing went through. A formal notice was sent to Michelle and Stephen. They had 30 days to agree to a buyout or prepare for court. That's when the call started. Michelle tried sweet-talking me first. "David, come on. Let's be civil. We're family." Stephen tried guilt. "Really, David? After all we've been through." Then came the anger, the threats, the tears. "You're tearing this family apart." No, I wasn't. They'd torn it apart the moment they chose profit over people, laughter over loyalty. I was just making sure they didn't get away with it. But I didn't stop there. Remember the group chat they used to mock me? I hadn't said a word in it. Not until the day mediation was scheduled. Then I posted one message, just one, "See you in court." And bring the rental statements. The chat exploded, but I muted it. Instead, I reached out to someone else. The tenants. A few families had rented the house through the private site Michelle used. I found them, asked for copies of their contracts, payments, dates, photos. Turns out one of them was a lawyer himself. He said, "I'm happy to give you a sworn statement. What they did wasn't just sneaky. It's fraud." Perfect. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. As the court date drew near, I felt steady. Like I was finally standing on something solid. Not made of spite. Not made of fire. Just truth. Noah and I made a pact. No yelling, no drama. We'd walk in, speak clearly, and let the evidence speak for us. But I'll be honest, part of me hoped, just hoped, to see the look on Michelle's face when she realized the doormat grew teeth, when she realized the family punching bag finally hit back. And this time, it wouldn't be a joke. The courtroom wasn't what I expected. No grand chandeliers, no raised voices or slamming gavels. Just beige walls, squeaky chairs, and the low hum of a ceiling fan from the 80s. But I wasn't there for the decor. I was there for the reckoning. Noah and I sat on one side of the long conference table. Across from us, Michelle was overdressed, hair sprayed, pearl earrings, and that same holier-than-thou look she'd worn since we were kids. Stephen, on the other hand, looked like he'd just come from the golf course, button-down shirt half-tucked, sunglasses on his head, still trying to charm his way through life. Their lawyer, a stiff man in a gray suit with a Bluetooth headset, looked annoyed the second he walked in. I got the impression they'd already tried to spin the whole thing in their favor, and it hadn't worked. Not with the paperwork we'd submitted. Not with the recorded voicemail, the receipts, emails, contracts, and tenant statements. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, got right to the point. "Mr. David," she said, flipping through the thick stack of documents my attorney provided. "You're requesting a partition sale of the jointly owned lake property, citing financial exploitation and mismanagement by your co-owners. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you've declined the buyout offer they submitted?" I nodded. Because it wasn't close to fair market value and they profited off the property for years without disclosure. The judge turned to Michelle and Stephen. "Would you like to respond?" Michelle launched into a speech about family, tradition, emotional value. Stephen added a few quips about miscommunication and harmless mistakes, but the judge wasn't having it. She held up one of the tenant contracts. "This says you received $1,200 for a weekend rental last April. Neither Mr. David nor Mr. Noah received a share of that income." Silence. Michelle muttered, "We were managing it." We didn't think. That's the problem, the judge cut in. You didn't think. What followed was 30 minutes of their lawyer fumbling through justifications while our lawyer calmly laid out the timeline. Every unapproved rental, every repair I paid for, every ignored request to use the house. The judge's expression grew tighter with every document presented. Finally, she looked at the two of them and said, "I don't see a case here. What I see is financial misconduct and a clear pattern of exclusion. Unless the petitioners are compensated with a buyout equal to fair market value, plus damages for unpaid rental income, I'm granting a forced sale." Michelle's mouth dropped. "You can't be serious." Stephen leaned forward. "This is our family's legacy." The judge didn't flinch. "Then perhaps you should have treated your family like family." And, just like that, it was done. They had 30 days to make an honest buyout offer, or the lake house would go on the market publicly at a price neither of them could afford to loan. When we walked out of the courthouse, Noah turned to me and grinned. "That was better than fireworks." I didn't smile. Not yet. I needed to see it through, and I did. They tried to stall, offered us a pittance, even claimed we were emotionally blackmailing them. But the evidence stood. Our attorney filed the final paperwork, and the house went up for sale 6 weeks later. It sold in 4 days for $742,000. After closing costs and legal fees, Noah and I each received a check for just over $170,000. Michelle and Stephen got the same, but not before the judge ordered them to pay back a combined $36,000 in unshared rental profits, which of course came out of their end. Noah and I didn't have to lift a finger. The day the wire hit my account, I sat in my backyard and stared at my phone. I thought I'd feel triumph, vindication. What I felt was clean. Like a slate finally wiped down after years of graffiti. Chloe came by that night with a bottle of wine. We sat by the fire pit, and she raised a glass. "To dignity," she said. "And to not letting people walk over you just because they share your DNA." I laughed. "I'll drink to that." The fallout came fast. Michelle stopped speaking to me, which frankly felt like a gift. Stephen tried one last dig online, some passive-aggressive post about greedy relatives, but nobody bit. Not after the truth came out. Turns out a few of their friends had rented the house, too. And suddenly, they were asking awkward questions. Reputation matters when you live in a small town. Michelle and Stephen learned that the hard way. I took a portion of the money and invested it back into Second Fix Home Services. Upgraded my tools, branded my van, built a small website. Business boomed. Sarah, remember her from book club, started helping me with scheduling and admin work. Then one day, she kissed me on the porch before leaving and said, "You know, David, it's nice to see you standing tall." We've been together ever since. Chloe framed a photo of the lake house just before we sold it and wrote in the corner, "Goodbye to what they stole. Hello to what you built." I hung it in my office. As for Michelle and Stephen, I haven't heard from them since. But sometimes, when I drive past the courthouse or glance at that photo, I think about the man I used to be. The one who grilled burgers in a garage while people laughed at his name on a cake. The one who took the picture but was never in it. And I smile, because that man's gone. In his place stands someone who finally knows his worth. The best retribution isn't anger. It's becoming someone they can't ignore because they no longer have access to you. Do you think I was wrong to walk away?